3100 BC, a new era was rising along the Nile River. The Nile was the only source of life in the desert. In the south, Upper Egypt was rising. Prompt, map animation Lower Egypt Delta region Ancient Egypt highlighted. Upper Egypt was symbolized by the white crown. Lower Egypt was represented by the red crown. These two kingdoms remained divided for a long time, until a leader appeared. His name was Narmer united the two crowns under a single kingdom. Thus, the first unified Egypt was born. This unification was more than a victory. It was the beginning of a civilization. This moment was immortalized on the Narmer palette. On the stone, Narmer is shown striking down his enemy. This scene carried a message. Order had been established over chaos. Narmer established the capital of the unified Egypt, Memphis. The foundation of the new state was not only power, it was religion. The pharaoh was no longer just a king, but the earthly representative of the gods. Los 1580 BCE in Giza, the Great Pyramid of Khufu rises. 146 meters high. 2.3 million stone blocks, each weighing about 2.5 tons. Around 100,000 workers. And this was only a tomb. Because Pharaoh wanted to believe he was a god. And a god had to be immortal. The pyramids were machines of immortality. Inside them were corridors, chambers, and treasures. The pharaoh journeyed to the sky, toward the constellation of Orion. The Egyptians believed that after death, the pharaoh joined the stars. And beside the pyramids, another monumental structure rose, the Sphinx. 73 meters long. A lion's body. This head represented a pharaoh, most likely the strength of a lion and the mind of a human symbolized the authority of the pharaoh on earth. And the Sphinx remained buried beneath the sands for 4,500 years. During Napoleon's Egyptian campaign in 1798, the Sphinx began to be uncovered again. The scholars who accompanied Napoleon began documenting Egypt's monuments. Modern Egyptology was born. But for the Egyptians, immortality was not only in pyramids. The mummification process lasted about 70 days. The brain was removed through the nose using a specialized hook. The internal organs were removed and placed into canopic jars. The heart was left in place because it would be weighed against the feather of Mat in the afterlife. 1479 BCE, a woman rose to the throne. Her name was Hatshepsut, but she declared herself not queen, but pharaoh. She wore the royal beard. She appeared like the kings before her. 1479 BCE, a woman rose to the throne, Hatshepsut. She was depicted as a male king, wearing the royal beard, dressing like a pharaoh. But her reign became an era of prosperity rather than war. Hatshepsut chose trade instead of war. She launched an expedition to the land of Punt, today believed to be near Somalia. Gold, incense, exotic animals. Egypt became richer than ever before. 1332 BCE, a child became pharaoh, Tutankhamun. He was only 9 years old. His reign was short, but his name would be heard across the world thousands of years later. Tutankhamun died at just 19 years old. His reign was short. He was buried in a modest tomb. At the time, he was not considered an important pharaoh. In 1922, Howard Carter discovered the tomb of Tutankhamun. It was almost untouched. After 3,000 years, the treasure of a pharaoh returned to the light. Inside the tomb, more than 5,000 artifacts were discovered, but the most famous was the golden mask, 11 kilograms of pure gold. This discovery revived global interest in ancient Egypt. On the Giza Plateau, more than pyramids rose into the sky. A colossal lion with a human face symbolized the divine power of the pharaoh. The Sphinx declared that the king of Egypt was not merely a ruler but a sacred being. 1279 BCE, Ramesses II ruled for 66 years at Abu Simbel. He immortalized himself with colossal statues that declared his divine power. His peace treaty with the Hittites became one of the earliest known agreements in world history. After 1000 BCE, Egypt began to weaken. Libyan rulers became pharaohs. Nubians advanced from the south. Assyrians attacked from the north. Egypt was no longer the dominant power it once had been. In 332 BCE, Alexander the Great entered Egypt after defeating the Persians. He was declared pharaoh at the Temple of Amen. Soon after, he founded Alexandria, which became one of the greatest centers of knowledge in the ancient world. After Alexander's death, his general Ptolemy took control of Egypt. A Greco-Egyptian dynasty began that would last nearly 300 years. The Library of Alexandria became a center of knowledge where scholars from across the ancient world gathered. In 48 BCE, Cleopatra was in exile. With the support of Julius Caesar, she returned to the throne. According to legend, she secretly entered the palace hidden inside a carpet. This alliance tied the fate of Egypt to Rome. In 31 BCE, at the Battle of Actium, Cleopatra and Mark Antony were defeated by Octavian. 1 year later, Cleopatra died. With her death, the 3,000-year era of the Pharaohs came to an end. Egypt became a province of Rome. After Cleopatra's death in 30 BCE, Egypt became a province of Rome. The wealth of the Nile now supported the Roman Empire. For centuries, Egypt became one of the most important grain suppliers of the Mediterranean world. In 641, Arab armies, led by Ammar ibn al-As, entered Egypt. The country passed from Byzantine control into the Islamic world. A new era had begun. In 1517, Egypt became part of the Ottoman Empire under Sultan Selim I for centuries. The land of the Nile remained an important province of the Ottoman world. In 1799, French soldiers discovered the Rosetta Stone. It contained the same text written in 3 different scripts. This discovery became the key to unlocking ancient Egyptian writing. In 1822, Jean-François Champollion succeeded in deciphering hieroglyphs using the Rosetta Stone. After thousands of years of silence, the language of ancient Egypt could finally be read again. Today, Egypt still stands with its thousands of years of history. Pyramids, temples, and cities along the Nile continue to attract millions of visitors every year. A civilization over 5,000 years old is still telling its story to the world. From Narmer to Cleopatra, 170 pharaohs ruled along the Nile for 3,000 years. They developed writing, shaped calendars, and left behind some of the most enduring monuments in human history. Academic sources: Mark, Joshua J., Ancient Egypt World History Encyclopedia. Ian Shaw, The Oxford History of Ancient Egypt. Toby Wilkinson, The Rise and Fall of Ancient Egypt. Aidan Dodson, Amarna, Sunset, Nefertiti, Tutankhamun. Nicholas Reeves, The Complete Tutankhamun. Joyce Tildesley, Cleopatra, Last Queen of Egypt. The story that began along the Nile lasted for 3,000 years. Pharaohs disappeared, empires changed, but Egypt remained. And even today, among the stones, the oldest story of humanity continues to whisper. Eternal Egypt.